Hey, what's happening? It's Doug Cunnington here, and welcome to the Doug Show. In this interview, I talked to Zack Strebeck, and Zack is a student of Five Figure Niche Site, but we're not really going to talk about niche sites so much directly because Zack is actually a lawyer, and he has a pretty interesting story about how he started not with anything to do with law, and then realized that he wanted to do something different. So he actually dealt blackjack for a little while. And I didn't know any of this stuff before we started chatting. And the thing is, he's a lawyer, so we talk about like the law aspects and trademark aspects of running an affiliate site and having like an online business. So he's able to answer a lot of questions for me because I would say, aggressively ignorant, and actually not aggressively ignorant. I'm just ignorant. I'm just ignorant about the matters of law because it's not my background. So anyway, I asked Zack a lot of like basic questions, maybe a couple more advanced questions, and we get into details around privacy policy, the GDPR, and some other things related to affiliate marketing. Now, you may be thinking, law topics, that could be pretty dry and boring. Well, you're right. And I actually thought the same thing during the interview. So as Zack and I were chatting, I was like, you know what? Let's ask a question about the law, and then let's hear a personal story, and then go back and forth. So let me know what you think about that approach, because I think it made it more interesting, and it was a little give and take. Because I mean, let's face it, laws are kind of boring, and we'd rather be talking about marketing and stuff, but following the rules is indeed important. So anyway, Zack has a podcast. He has a website as well. So I'll put links and stuff. Be sure to check it out. And Zack's going to join me on some future episodes. So please leave questions in the comments and stuff like that, so we can answer them later. All right, let's hear from Zack now. Hey, what's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here, and I'm with Zack Strebeck. Did I get the last name right?
That's correct.
Awesome. So Zack is my lawyer friend. And for people that don't know you, Zack, can you give a little intro?
Sure. My name is Zack Strebeck. I am a lawyer. Most of my practice involves video games and board games and websites and mobile apps and things like that, sort of the new media type things. But mostly I'm known as a video game and a board game lawyer. But I'm also a niche site owner, having done Doug's course. So that's how I kind of got involved with all this.
Very cool. And how did you find your way into the like game area of lawyering? Because that sounds more interesting than some of the other lawyer stuff
Yeah.
that you could be doing, right?
Most lawyering is pretty boring. Although being a game lawyer is also boring. It's just doing something a little more interesting. I used to be a game developer, so I used to do animation and game design for children's computer games a long time ago. And so as I transitioned out of that career and into a new one, I decided to choose video games and board games as my practice focus, my client focus.
Gotcha. So you were like a game designer and then went to law school after that?
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. How long?
I wasn't a very good I wasn't a very good artist. So I'm a better lawyer than I am an artist. I kind of think I found my calling while still staying in the same industry.
Gotcha. So this is sort of off from the topic that we're going to cover, but I was hoping that we would find a thread like this. So how did you like end up deciding, because law school is I assume not cheap, it takes a lot of time, it's not easy, yes. Right? So how did you figure like, hey, I'm going to quit my job, take a detour, and just like change things up?
Well, I got laid off from the game company I was working at one point, so I'm sure you kind of have a shared experience there. And I transitioned into a second career, which is working in casinos. So I was a blackjack dealer for about 6 years. And while I did that, I hated it. You talk about repetitive work. We're sort of just doing the same thing over and over again all day. Hated that. So while I was there, I started to I got another bachelor's degree in history and decided to go to law school after that. During law school, I didn't work, but after school ended and I graduated, passed the bar, I started my own solo practice like the next day and went digital nomad for 3 or 4 years after that, sort of traveling the world and running it virtually.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. So you did the blackjack dealing for 6 years, you said. So where were you located for that?
Near Palm Springs, California, so outside of Los Angeles. I started off in Coachella. People know Coachella now because of the Coachella Music Festival, which when I was there, it didn't exist yet, I don't think. But it was at a Trump Trump casino out there, and then I moved inward a little bit toward Palm Springs and started working there.
Okay. Interesting. Super interesting. And then so you got a second bachelor's degree in history, and did you know that you were going to go to law school? I know history is sort of like one of the, very common for lawyers is the degree, right?
That's why I did it. That's why I picked history. I was also interested in it personally. However, I mean, knowing what I know now, I probably would have done some sort of science. You can't be a patent attorney, so I can't write patents or deal with patents unless I have some sort of science or technical background, which I probably could have done, but I didn't. So,
gotcha.
Kind of screwed up there.
Interesting. Yeah, I knew actually a couple. Actually, I guess I'm not good friends with him now, but a couple good friends, and one guy I went to high school with. He got a double E degree. Ended up working at the patent office, and I think he eventually got his law degree. And it's like, man, that's a pretty good combination of like technical skills and like cool stuff.
Yeah. And there's a lot of earning potential there.
Yeah. And then there was this other dude who he got an ME degree, and then he got his master's, and then his law degree, and ended up like as a like IP and patent, and like was doing stuff with Google, and like it was kind of great. Like once you see the path, it's like, oh wow, that's amazing. So
exactly.
Anyway, so the reason why we're talking is to sort of get into the legal areas that people that have affiliate sites or niche sites or making money online with websites should be concerned about. So I have sort of a list of a couple topics that are pretty common questions that I have. And generally, I think most people are similar to me in that we don't know much about laws or what we're actually supposed to do. So we kind of try and do our best, but probably make a ton of mistakes. So let's start with a couple of the very basic things which are around. I'm not sure. I can't remember what I said there, but basically disclaimers and like the FTC. So for me, as I'm doing more affiliate marketing, mentioning more products, I am basically probably overdoing it and just saying like affiliate, like I'm affiliated with them, I get a commission, like if you buy, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm mentioning at the beginning, at the end, making it super clear in plain language. So just from a high level, what do people need to know about the FTC, disclaimers, and mentioning affiliation, that sort of thing?
Right. Well, I mean, you're definitely in. So I'll preface this by saying the FTC actually has some great documents online on their website. So if you look up endorsement guidelines, they have some documents that you can read that are pretty plainly stated and give some examples. But there have definitely been some lawsuits. If you're a niche site owner, affiliate site owner, most likely the FTC is not going to come after you because you're just too small. So most of the brands that the FTC have come after have been like fashion brands that have done Instagram contests where they have people doing hashtags, but they're not disclosing that they're sponsored, things like that. However, it doesn't hurt to be compliant with the law. So it's good to familiarize yourself with it. I mean, generally you want to assume that people aren't going to read past where they're going to be clicking the affiliate link. And I know that you've talked about this before, and you put your affiliate disclosure up near the top, which is good because they're guaranteed to see that, right? But if you put it in your sidebar, if you put it down in your footer, if they're looking on mobile, they're gonna be seeing 20 affiliate links by the time they get to, your sidebar starts at the bottom and then your footer's below that. So they're not going to get to your disclosure. So arguably you're not doing it correctly because you're not really giving them notice that these are sponsored links, right? And you can use a hashtag, you can use a hashtag affiliate, hashtag sponsored, something like that, or just a little notice that like you use that says, these are affiliate links, I make a little bit of money. If you put it in plain language and you say it in a way that makes them want to support you, help to support the site, I get a little bit from when you click these links and buy something, right? And even some people with this doesn't cost you any more, but it helps us to keep the site running, that kind of thing. But as long as it's in plain language and it's sort of commensurate with where the affiliate link is, I think that's the best way you're going to do it. That's the way the FTC is going to tell you to do it as well.
Cool. So, and I want to go back to a part that you mentioned where if you put your disclaimer or actually anything in your sidebar, probably anyone on mobile is not going to see it. And the reason why, and you alluded to it, but just want to underscore it. So for a mobile responsive site, typically the sidebar is going to be placed under the content nowadays. Yep. So yeah, like you said, they maybe wouldn't see it. They wouldn't scroll all the way down. And depending on, some of my pages are so long, I wouldn't expect them to scroll down 25% of it, let alone get to the very bottom. And I guess the spirit of the law is to let the person know if they click the link that you're going to get a commission and you're affiliated. So if it's in the bottom, then the spirit of the law isn't I don't know what I'm trying to say, but the spirit of the law isn't respected.
The law wants the user to know that you have a vested interest in them clicking that link, right? So it's not like 100% free choice that you've decided on these products, or that you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. They want to know that there's a financial incentive there, and then the user can make that decision however they want. But they also want, like you're getting at, they want a viewer that's seeing that link to also be aware of the fact that it is an affiliate link or a sponsored link at the same time.
Indeed. So anything else around the disclaimer or anything like that before we shift gears a little bit here?
The FTC, I gave some examples, but the endorsement guidelines actually do give some examples of what they would be. And if you're doing social media posts, it's the same thing. So if you're putting, you do your deal of the day or your product of the day or something on your Facebook page or whatever that's connected with your affiliate site, you're supposed to do an affiliate hashtag or a sponsored hashtag or something like that. And you can, there are specifics, like it can't be hashtag AFF or hashtag, like really shortened versions of it. It's really supposed to be the whole word. And honestly, those are all in the guidelines.
Cool.
They've kind of covered that.
Excellent. Yes, and I've actually read those, so we'll put links and stuff so people can go check those out. And like you said, Zach, it's pretty readable, for normal people to understand.
Yeah.
And with examples, it's kind of hard to goof up.
Yep.
Unless you're not following it. So, and as we're going through this, I realize that legal stuff is boring. So we're going to mix it up and we're going to do some
I agree.
We're going to do some content. We're going to do some other off-topic stuff. So you went digital nomad for a few years. Can you talk about that some? Because this is a dream of many, many people, and it sounds like you had a kind of an unusual path through your career and in general. So how was the digital nomad stuff? How did you figure out to do that?
I got into it based on, like many nomads, the 4-hour work week. When I read that, I think a mentor of mine had recommended maybe it was the Tropical MBA podcast, and they kind of turned me on to 4-hour work week. So I read that, and all of that and the mentor had been a solo attorney as well. And all of that sort of came together and made me think, hey, I can start my own business. I can run it from everywhere. I don't go to court as a lawyer. I draft contracts and do a lot of transactional work and deal with intellectual property. So I don't need to be anywhere. So as long as I'm awake in the right time zone, I can do the work from anywhere. So, and it's actually kind of funny because for the first year or so, there really wasn't enough money coming in from clients, because all my clients are coming from content marketing. So just like us with the affiliate sites, I write blog posts and the blog posts bring people in. I write guest posts and the guest posts bring people in. I mean, all of that stuff. I kind of did it intuitively. I'm getting better at it as I actually learned from you and from other affiliate site SEO type people. But in the beginning, it was just creating content and getting it out there. And to make money, I did writing for other blogs, sort of content creation. I worked for a text broker, so I was basically doing whatever their slave wages are for their 4-star writers. It's not much. So, we kind of had a sidebar before we started recording this about, how much you can actually make or how much you need to pay writers so that they can actually live. And, if you live in Bangkok like I was, or around Southeast Asia, and I lived in Mexico for a little while, and, I travel around, the cost of living is pretty cheap, but, you need to work. I needed to work about 3 or 4 hours a day writing text broker blogs, and then I could afford to live and spend the rest of my time trying to grow my business.
Gotcha. And how long ago was that?
2014. So the beginning of 2014 is when I started my business. So for the first year, I was probably, that was fully nomadic and spending a few hours each day. I was fortunate enough because I had legal training. I could get on a legal team on Text Broker, and they had a steady supply of work coming in all the time. So it was always something, but it was, $7 a post or something like that, or you just have to crank them out. And like 90% of it is, and this is writing for legal blogs. And this is one of the crazy things, like legal blogs have the worst content. It was basically like you'd take a car accident story and you'd rewrite it and then put a little blurb about, what you do, call a lawyer if you have a car accident or whatever. I mean, you want to talk about like the do's and don'ts of creating good content. This exposed me to the worst kind of content, which is just like trash to fill up a blog, right? But there was, just hundreds of these posts available to write. So, you just write them. I'd write about some celebrity's divorce 10 times and just sort of write the same post in slightly different ways so many times. It's just ridiculous.
That's terrible, man. So that was for about a year, you said, as things were ramping up for your business. And then over time you started like bringing in like legal clients and you had a steady stream, so you didn't have to do the text broker gig.
I remember the feeling when I thought, I don't need to write these stupid things anymore. I'm done. And, I just had enough money coming in from my business that it was fine. And I know a lot of affiliate site owners probably have the same thing. You have that number you need to hit. And when you do, it's like, all right, I don't need to do this full-time job anymore. I don't need to do whatever else I'm doing to make money. I can just let the website work.
Right on. So before you left on your travels and stuff, did you save up like a nest egg or something like that, or you were like, I'm just going to pull the plug and I'll do the text broker thing?
I sold my car on Craigslist. I put it up there, and an hour later, some guy showed up with $4,000 in cash and bought it, and some shady business with signing it to his uncle or something like that. But I didn't really care. It was like it was done, and I was out. And so that $4,000 got me the first few months in Thailand and the plane ticket, and the money was coming in slowly but surely. So that kind of kept me going. I mean, it's tight living. I know that, but if you save up more, you save up $10,000 or something like that, you can live around in Southeast Asia for about a year, probably, as long as you don't get kicked out for visa reasons.
Gotcha. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. Like we sort of traveled around in the US a little bit, but like we did the opposite. We went to like expensive cities and rented like expensive houses and stuff. Yeah. To each their own.
It's different lifestyle.
Yeah.
Now I'm more able to do that because I actually have a decent business. But before that, so I was living on the cheap.
Right. And I was going to say, we had a dog that we wanted to bring with us. So that's part of the reason. So anyway, back to the topic and back to the boring stuff. So let's talk about GDPR And I remember it was, I guess, like a year and some change ago. I kept seeing all this information coming out. Aweber was sending me stuff. Other companies were sending me information. I was getting all these notices. And then I was like, what is this fucking stuff going on? So can you explain what is GDPR? What does it even stand for? Why do we care?
It's the General Data Protection Regulation, I believe. It applies to EU residents, which can be people who live in the EU now or also EU residents that are living abroad. So it's pretty wide ranging, and that's why people were freaking out about it, because even if someone's in the US, if you're taking their email address without their consent or something like that, you're technically in violation. So, everyone updated their privacy policies because you need to alert people. They have a certain amount of rights that are free. So a right to see what information you have on them, a right to delete that information, a right to not be just various things. And so, yeah, people were going nuts. The big thing is, with an affiliate site, I mean, there's a few things that you specifically need to think about. The big one in the background is data security and making sure that any personal information that you're getting from people is sort of secured. And a lot of these third-party services that we use are probably going to have better data security than if you had a server in your in your house or something like that, right? I mean, they use Amazon Web Services that's like, in a special place with security guards and all that. So everything's encrypted. All that's great. You use SSL encryption on your site, that kind of stuff. That's good. The other thing is getting consent when you take personal information. So this is why Aweber and MailChimp were sending out these emails that, give you GDPR tools and things like that. Because if you're, someone's email address and their first name and last name, phone number, whatever you take from them, that's all personal information that you need to make sure that you have either consent to get it, or there's actually 6, they call them lawful basis for taking and processing that information. With a mailing list like that, consent is going to be the number one. So basically, it's like, they have to know when they're putting their email address what they're signing up for. So if you kind of lie to them and say, we're going to send you this, but actually you're putting them on a mailing list or sending that information to someone else or things like that, you can't do that. So you can only really use it for the purpose that you've clued them into. But if you've got people, and you're playing about, sign up for the newsletter and I'll send you this free lead magnet, then you really didn't have any problems before GDPR. And so they were kind of freaking out about nothing. You were already compliant because you were already getting consent. And that consent is recorded with MailChimp or Aweber or ConvertKit or whatever you're using. So it wasn't a big deal. The big deals are things like if you use Google Analytics, let's say, you need to disclose that you're using that, and that's taking certain personal information like their IP address and things like that, their location, that kind of stuff. So, usually a privacy policy should have all of this stuff. So you basically do an inventory. What information am I taking from them? How am I using it, and who am I sharing it with? And you need to disclose all that stuff in your privacy policy. And I suspect that most, and probably even on my affiliate sites, that is not properly doing all of that. So it may be worth taking a look at that. Now, again, most of our sites are so small, even when they're big sites, they're still so small that no one's ever going to notice and no one's ever going to care. But again, it's good to be compliant regardless and just keep yourself safe.
Got it. Got it. So the main idea is to make sure you have consent whenever someone's like providing some information, and to give them the ability to like see what it is and delete it if they want to.
Yeah. They need to be able to opt out too, which is good. Again, because the CAN-SPAM Act already required that in your emails, there needs to be something at the bottom of the email that they can unsubscribe. So if you're already using one of these services, they're already going to be forcing you to comply with that. So it should be fine.
Cool. And the one thing that I changed, like for Niche Site Project, not for any of my affiliate sites, is that you actually mentioned it. So like we'll send you the lead magnet, but I also needed to add, this is one thing that I went through all my opt-ins, and I was like, I'll send you a few emails a week, because sometimes I do send more than one. And then I send promotional emails as well to let them know you're going to be sold to at some point. Because I think that, I wanted to make that clear. I'm going to sell to you
Yeah.
at some point, and you're going to get information, but I'm going to sell you something.
Yeah, and some, I know MailChimp does it because I use MailChimp for my business. They'll allow you to do kind of a GDPR compliant setup where they can select different types of emails and they're put into different segments. So they can select, I just want the newsletter, I want the promotional emails, I want this and that. And you can categorize them in different ways so that you can make sure that you're not sending them things they didn't agree to, which is good. I mean, if you want to be like 100% on the level with GDPR, having that kind of granularity can't hurt. But again, I don't know. It depends on, and this is sort of the more advanced affiliate site stuff because a lot of the newer sites aren't doing mailing lists and aren't even bothering with this stuff. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. So, I guess a little bit deeper on this, like for the average person, like let's say they have a pretty big website. Let's say they're getting, 100 to 200,000 visitors per month or something like that. Like,
Yep.
could they like actually be sued through like violations with GDPR?
Potentially. So what happens is a user will complain to one of the data protection authorities in Europe, and each country in the EU has their own. So let's say they send a complaint to the German authority. The German authority will then, review it and see if there's something there, and they could either assess a fine, so the big freak out when GDPR was coming out was that the fine could be up to 4% of your global revenue or something like that. Like it was, for bigger companies, it was like some insane number. Now they haven't been that high. Even the day one complaints against Google and Facebook and all them were, I think Google was something like 50 million euro, which if you're Google isn't really that much. And it was because they were not disclosing things about personalized ads. And so the personalized ads is the bigger thing. I think taking email addresses for an authority site probably is lower on their list, but I think there's places where you can actually look at what the judgments under GDPR have been, and you can see if there's similar sites to you on there. Okay. But it would require that someone complains. Your users would complain first, and then the authorities will look into it. And you don't get sued under GDPR. You just sort of, it's like a government complaint process, administrative process. Okay. But they can impose fines on you. So, I mean, there is danger of a fine, I suppose.
Okay. And then final question for GDPR here. They, I land on these websites and then I see the little pop-up and it's like, we're using cookies and blah, blah, blah. You have to consent and all that. And it's like the worst user experience. It's like the dumbest thing ever. And I don't do it. And I'm like, hopefully no one complains with me on my soapbox. But I'm just like, you know what? Like, don't come to my website. It's a very like self-centered way to approach it, I suppose. Right. But I'm just like, hey, look, you're using the internet. You're getting free stuff. Yeah. Like, I'm taking analytics.
You can thank the EU for that. Yeah, I understand. There are certain cookies you don't need to disclose, and then there are others that you do. So there's a list. It's actually, this wasn't from GDPR. This is there's an EU cookie directive that came before this, actually. And so that's where you're getting the cookie stuff from and why you need to agree to it. And a lot of it is like if they're tracking you from one site to another and things like that. Which may be the case. I'm not sure how Amazon affiliate works. That may be a cookie that is the kind that you need to disclose. And again, even on my own sites, I will freely admit that I'm not kind of in full compliance with this. I worry about my business, but not necessarily. My affiliate sites aren't big enough that they're even anything worth worrying about. But it's one of those things that as you get bigger, that's the kind of thing you should start to think about. Are you doing it proper? And I understand. I agree. It's a terrible user experience. These things pop up on every site, and I swear, even if I clicked it one day, I feel like it's coming back another day. And there are some standard JavaScript things that you can add to your sites. I think there's like open cookie something where you can have them do that and just get that okay on there. Mm-hmm. But still, you're right. It's a terrible user experience.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
the law. Unfortunately, it's the law. They don't seem to care.
Yeah, it's funny, like, because I was revamping my site, like trying to work on speed and stuff, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like just hose everything down now and make it so no one can read anything. I know there's other ways to handle it, but that's my interpretation. I
Yeah.
was like, this is dumb. I'm not gonna do it, which
Yeah.
is not what you're supposed to do with laws and everything, but well, that's just where I ended up on it. So, okay, shifting to the more interesting topic, and then we're gonna do this back and forth thing.
Okay.
So,
Sure.
how did you get into like the affiliate sites? Like you mentioned, you were a student in Five Figure Niche site. So how did you like find your way into it? Do you remember?
It's a good question. So okay. Before I even started the digital nomad thing, one of the things I started doing was making, I had found, well, they were Empire flippers then. Wait, are they still, they were AdSense flippers back then, right? They're Empire flippers now. Is
Yep.
that, or EF? They have a different name even.
Yeah. Or
I think.
Empire, maybe just Empire. They've like continued
Yeah.
to generalize. Yeah.
Well, now they're a website flipping place, right? It used to be that they were like, they were telling you how to do AdSense websites and things like that. So I did a bunch of terrible websites that were just like, I was like putting up like 200 word blog posts, trying to get, and I had no idea what I was doing. And then I was trying to do like drop shipping stores and all this nonsense. And I didn't understand any of it. Eventually I joined this group. The Tropical MBA has the Dynamite Circle. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like their little sort of mastermind or, group for sort of serious business people. I joined that and I met Dom Wells through there. And I saw that he was doing these done for you websites. So I ended up buying 2 of those, which, I probably was a mistake. It was just more than I could handle, right? Probably one would have been a better deal. Because actually one of those is still sort of sitting there and I haven't gotten back to it because I ended up starting another site with your course as well. Because I think through Dom, he had done some training that mentioned KGR stuff. And then I ended up looking that up and I saw your video and ended up buying your course and getting into it from there. So that's my affiliate site journey, I suppose. But yeah, it started off, they were a complete disaster. And I still have, it's funny, I'm reminded all the time because they're all still in my Google Analytics, all the sites that don't even exist anymore, but I can see all the names of it. And it's like my blood pressure monitor or something dumb like that, where it's like some very hyper specific thing that, is just a terrible, and they're all .info or some crazy, just terrible. But I'm sure you know that as well. I didn't have a story like you where they made a lot of money in the beginning. I made 0 money off of that. In fact, I got my AdSense account banned like day one when I tried putting ads on these things. And then, I still haven't reinstated it.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, it's like for people that don't know, or maybe they got into this like in the last couple of years or something like that. Mm-hmm. I got started around the same time as you, 2013, 2014, and AdSense flippers. Yeah, I remember downloading their free ebook. It was like 70 pages on how to start.
I bought Longtail Pro.
all the stuff. Yeah. And like so many of the big, like, Empire flippers, big marketplace. They're pushing, I don't know how many millions of dollars through, and they're, they have a big reach, and it's just amazing because they literally started with these generally regarded as crappy sites, small AdSense sites, and what they did was they figured out how to just systematize it, and like build a bunch of them, and realized, well, we could sell them. So they were, Empire flippers, right? So they were flipping these AdSense sites as they were building them, and actually, like, Dom started doing that at Human Proof Designs, and he stuff with Amazon affiliate sites, which they're still doing, and they've gotten better over time. So it's kind of crazy. Like, people started at a certain point, and just like their trajectory is pretty amazing if they stuck with it.
Yeah.
So
what they sold me was the dream of having an empire of sites that I could sell and flip and make money from, which still hasn't quite happened yet, especially with the AdSense stuff. But
indeed,
I'm still working on it.
So in quick correction, so I had probably 8 sites that were not very good, but I just did them really quickly, and then within a year, like, I had 1 or 2 like successes, and I quickly got penalized after that. So, I mean, it was kind of a roller coaster ride across the board. So anyway, it's perfectly normal, everyone, to have just a mess of a wake of failed sites behind you. So
that's how any business works, really. You have to fail and learn to walk before you can run, right? I mean, you're not going to hit it big right out of the gate.
Indeed.
Usually.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay. Now moving back to the boring legal stuff. So no offense, Zach, but privacy policies. So what should be in a privacy policy? Do you have like a sample? Like what high point should we hit here? Because I don't really know.
Yeah, it's the same as when I was talking about GDPR. I mean, that's basically what's sort of dictating privacy policies now. There's a California law that's going into place in 2020, so at the beginning of 2020. However, again, for most smaller sites, it's not going to apply. It's a question of if you meet certain thresholds, like it's like $50 million in sales or something like that, or a certain amount of users, 50,000 users or something like that, which could hit some site in California. And so if you're not hitting these numbers, then you don't need to worry about it. And then if you're not doing certain things, it doesn't matter. So generally, if you're meeting the GDPR rules, you're going to be hitting the California rules as well. If your site's big enough that you're actually worrying about this, then you're going to know, and you should look into it. I have a post on my site. We could probably link to that somewhere. But yeah, so what do you need? What personal information you're collecting, whether it's directly from the user, like when they sign up for a mailing list, or through something like Google Analytics, or if they sign in through a Facebook login or something like that. You need to disclose, I'm taking this information, which means I can take your age, your name, blah, 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 your friends, your profile picture, that kind of personal information. And then what do you do with it? Why do you use each of those things? What do you use it for? I use your email address and your first name and last name to deal with technical support issues, customer support issues, to deal with, to send you newsletters and run contests or whatever you do. And then who else do you share it with? So if you get the email address, but then you share it with MailChimp or with Aweber, you need to disclose that, who you're using, and then basically link to their privacy policy, because then their privacy policy is going to control. So this document is mostly a disclosure document. You want to disclose how you're doing all this stuff. There's not necessarily a limit to what you can do. GDPR does put some limits on it, especially it needs to be under a lawful basis. So I'll go through that. As I mentioned the lawful basis thing earlier, but consent is one of them. If you have a contractual relationship, so let's say they buy something through your site, you're selling your own info product, and you need to get their payment information and all of that. Well, the basis for taking that information is a contract, right? You are buying this thing, and I am delivering it to you. It could be if you're required by the law to give this up. So let's say you need to provide this to the authorities, all the logins from your website or something like that, and you're required by law to do that. There's something called legitimate interest, which is basically a catch-all for other things, where it's basically my interest in taking this information outweighs your interest in having privacy. Basically, that's sort of we couldn't find another place to put it, so we're going to stick it into legitimate interest. And that's sort of one that hasn't really been hashed out by the legal stuff, by the complaints and the regulatory authorities. There's some guidance on it, but it's not really 100%. So a lot of people maybe are overusing that or underusing that. We don't know. But yeah, You have all that stuff in there. They want you to talk about how you're securing the data. So maybe, we're controlling access. Only one of us has this, and we use certain types of passwords, and we use SSL, and we use this and that, right? Data centers are secured, blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff, whatever you can say as far as your security goes. And, what are you doing with cookies? I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff that you could put in a privacy policy. There are example ones out there. There's sites like TermsFeed and IU Benda or something like that. I don't know. But some of them are paid, so you need to pay them a monthly fee to have a privacy policy on your site, and it's like hosted through them. Or you can find them, or you can pay someone like me, hundreds of dollars to draft one for you. Either way.
Cool. And I think I used TermsFeed or a site like that where I went through like a questionnaire, and then they charge you, but it was a one-time fee
Okay.
And it was like, or at least the package that I got, I'm sure they have like a full menu of stuff, but it was like $100. And I was like, okay, like I feel pretty
Just get
secure.
it done.
Yeah. And I was like, it's a one-time thing and I feel confident that it's okay. People could go to nichesiteproject.com and find the privacy policy and take a look there for like what I did.
And copy it from you.
Yeah, you can copy it. Now, I guess, can people just generally find an existing one and kind of read through it and customize it in a general way, or is that kind of bad practice?
Well, as a lawyer, I would say you should never do that because your specific situation is going to be different than someone else's. So you may be doing something in particular on your site that's different than others. Maybe you're not using the same data security. Maybe you're taking other information. For example, on my mailing list, I don't take your name. I just take your email address, right? But others may be taking their name and their, maybe some other information about them. So, you're not disclosing one thing and you should be. So if you're copying someone else's, it's the same with their terms of use. If you have one of those, I never recommend copying someone else's only because your specific situation might be different. That being said, it's probably 95% the same. So do what you got to do. I'm not your lawyer. I suggest everyone get their own legal counsel when dealing with these things and trying to be GDPR compliant and all of that. It's complicated. Unfortunately, it's more complicated than I know. It sounds complicated when I'm talking about it, but it's in reality even more complicated. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the law. Yeah.
So, one last question about the privacy policy stuff. Now, sure. I know for the disclaimer, you want to make sure that the person sees it before they see an affiliate link. For the privacy policy, I usually see those links probably buried in the footer, like just available. It's sort of like, someone can find it if they need to, but you don't have to, put it right in their face. So is that a safe assumption, or what's the best practice?
The common practice is to just stick it in the footer. But GDPR and general best privacy practices is to let them know when you're at the point where you're taking the information. So when they're doing the newsletter sign up, right? You want them to know what you're taking and why you're taking it, right? So here's why you're taking this. We're going to send you newsletters, blah, blah, blah. Or if you need, their billing information, they're filling out a credit card form or something like that to buy your info product. On that form, you should explain to them why you're taking that information and what you're going to do with it and who you're sharing it with, right? We use Stripe to handle our payment processing, and we're sharing this information with them, blah, 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 So at the point of collecting the information, that's where you're supposed to be disclosing it, in addition to having the full posted privacy policy on your site. Now, when I do a lot of work with games and mobile apps, and generally what we'll do is have them beyond just having that, the point of disclosure, we also have a thing that they need to click through to agree to the terms of service and agree to the privacy policy as they're going through. You've probably done that as well and skip through them, but again, that is what it is. I don't read them either. I write them, but I don't read them, unfortunately, because I just assume they're taking everything and I have no power. And, in this modern world, I've just kind of grown to accept it. But maybe I'm the rare one. Maybe, most people aren't really care about their privacy. I know you're shaking your head because you're probably the same way. You just assume the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, and I was picturing the apps and stuff that we install where they have the field, like a text box. So you can scroll through it because it's like 40 pages or whatever kind of nonsense. And then you click, I read that. I didn't read it. Yeah. I assume everyone's taking everything.
Sometimes they force you to scroll all the way because of the worst. Yeah.
To the point where I have, we have like the Google Home devices. I literally have like recording devices like in different rooms so that Google can listen to me constantly. So I'm like, Yep, I'm pretty much resigned. I got nothing. There's cameras everywhere. Like I have no clue what's going on. Okay, so we're coming towards the end, and one of your specialties is around trademark and intellectual property and stuff like that. So what are like the top couple things that an affiliate marketer should think about for those types of ideas?
Right. So I could talk about this for hours, and I actually wrote a blog post that maybe will go up on your site at some point. all about trademark law, but I'll give you two things that I think a new affiliate site and an older one, and more, along the growth phase, should be thinking about. Number one would be, you don't want to be infringing on other people's trademarks. So if you're going to put, and this is one of my early AdSense sites or whatever affiliate sites was, I think it was like mybestmicrosoftcertification.com or something like that. So in that, I'm using Microsoft in the domain name, which is a huge no-no. You don't want to do that. So what you're doing is basically trademark infringement, what I was doing. The site doesn't exist anymore, but I was basically infringing on Microsoft's trademark, and they could have gone after me, whether it's a UDPR proceeding, which I talk about in the post, or some other legal means, right? It was basically infringing on their trademark. So what you're doing is confusing consumers as to what the source of the goods and services you're offering is. So, you go to a website and it says Microsoft something something in the URL, you assume it's from Microsoft, right? And so the law doesn't want you tricking people into selling your own products using their brand name, right? If I opened a store that says Honda cars and I'm selling a bunch of junkers, but I'm calling them Hondas, that's a problem, right? So the law is protecting consumers from getting screwed and getting the goods that they're not expecting. So that's number one. Don't use other brands in your name. And if your niche is like, something that's very specific, you don't want to just be too plain about it there and put the brand name of the product in there. The other thing is when you're coming up with your name, and so I like to think long term, brandability, so you assume when you're starting the niche site, it's real small and you just got 10 posts on there and you don't really know if it's going to be successful or not. However, 600 posts down the road and thousands of dollars a month, and you become like a real business, and maybe you want to sell that business or you're going to get noticed. You want a name that's brandable and that's distinctive. And so under trademark law, distinctiveness is the key, right? That's what makes a strong brand. So you want to go toward things that are they're more either fanciful trademarks or something that's like a totally made up word, right? Like Exxon is a made up word. And you specifically know when someone says Exxon, it's gas, right? Or something called an arbitrary trademark is like Apple. So Apple is just a regular word. And a lot of people complain and say, hey, how can you trademark a regular word like that? But it's because they're selling computers and they're selling phones, and the word Apple is totally disconnected from that. And that's what makes it strong. It's because now the public has to make that connection between the word Apple and these actual products. So you want to veer toward that, or even there's something called suggestive trademarks where you're just sort of suggesting the thing that you're going to be doing. And so you want to stay away from some bad trademarks that are like, we were discussing this before. You just did the teardown of the bestroofbox.com, I think it was, that Alex at WP Eagle had done. And in the opinion of a trademark lawyer, that's a terrible name because you're basically just describing the products that you're doing. And it's called a descriptive trademark, and there's basically no protection for that because it's not distinctive. It's just like saying what it is, right? Like if email is another one, right? It's just like I couldn't trademark email because it is email. And you had mentioned like there's a lot of the sites and brands in the SEO space are very plain. They're just sort of saying what they are.
Right.
Whereas something like, and actually Authority Hacker is a good one because it's like, it sort of says what it is, but it's not really about what it is. It's about websites. But I think if you had a trademark examiner at the USPTO see that, they would think that it's at least a suggestive trademark and not so much descriptive or generic. But then they have a site called Health Ambition. That's another sort of bad trademark where you're just sort of describing what it's about. Whereas if you pick something like, I don't know, there's a paleo guy called Mark Sisson. I don't know if you know this guy, but he is like Mark's Daily Apple is his website name. And that's like a great name. It's like, yeah, it's sort of about food and everything like that, but it's not like Mark's paleodietsite.com, right? It's not just saying what it is. It's like, it's a little, you're looking for that jump in imagination that you have to make, before you go between the products and the actual name. So that would be the advice for trademarks. So you want something it could be kind of in the area, but not quite on the nose. And it's actually good because you always talk about this, is not sort of, being very specific about your niche. You want to be a little bit broader so that as you grow, you're not just selling roof boxes, right? You're selling, all kinds of products that are in this sort of genre. So keeping it a little broader actually helps when you're coming up with a name, because you can kind of be a little more creative.
Exactly.
Does that all make sense? I kind of went on a rant about trademark, but
no, that's perfect.
Hopefully that
I
makes
was going to
sense.
say,
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Zach.
Yeah, no. Go for it.
So I was going to say that we probably can do a round 2 where we talk more about, trademark and logos and brand names, and you said you could talk
Sure.
for hours. So we can definitely go deeper on that. And people, if you have questions, leave them in the comments. Send us emails. Send me an email, feedback@doug.show, that kind of stuff. But I was going to say, to call back, just thinking about like naming and stuff like that. Empire flippers, right? So they were AdSense flippers at the beginning, and they slowly had to, they grew up. They had to rebrand and stuff like that.
It's a good rebrand too. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, it was, it was a very smart move, and they did it years ago. Again, people probably don't even realize like where they started initially. And I think Spencer Hawes over at Niche Pursuits, I think he had another website like before he did Niche Pursuits too, so people could probably like dig that up and find it and see what he was talking about before he leveled up and was like, okay, I want to talk about like my business pursuits here. So
Right.
Anything else to add around the trademark or logo idea or anything like that for early niche site owners?
Yeah, on the early side of things, I mean, it's just basically making sure that you have something distinctive, you're not infringing on anyone else, and then I don't know, the rest of the kind of, you can register trademarks, but at that early stage, I mean, you're going to pay $1,000 to do it. But if your site's not going to make money for a year and a half, and you don't know if it's going to be a good business or not, then it may not be worth it. Whereas if you're doing like a tech startup and, you're going to be releasing an app or something like that, I mean, you have more money in the beginning, hopefully, and getting a trademark is probably better. So that's why in the blog post, I kind of put the trademark registration in the growth phase. Once you've started to actually make money, it may be worth getting that kind of protection. So you can start going after other infringement. If people start noticing you and they start trying to kind of horn in on your domain name or on, stealing your site content and things like that, getting a little heavier legal protection, I think is a good thing.
Gotcha. And I guess like for someone starting, let's say, well, I'm just asking for me. Mm-hmm. So like someone who has like an internet marketing blog or a podcast, for example, like the show name that I picked, Doug.show, right? It's Doug.show because I was like, let's keep it simple, small number of syllables. Is that like a good move or a bad move from a like legal perspective?
So the Doug part is fine. They'll probably, because it is a show, they probably make you do what's called disclaiming the word show. So your trademark you can't claim any exclusive rights over the word show because you are a show and it's just describing your thing. However, the Doug part, that makes it distinctive, hopefully. I don't know. I would have to do a trademark search and sort of make sure that there's no conflicting things out there. But it's I think it's fine. What specifically was the question? Just, is it distinctive enough, or is there another question?
I guess I don't have a very clear question, I guess, but I guess one thing, I think there is another podcast that has like, it's generally simple. The guy's name is also Doug, but I think he has like a comedy show, and mine's more like marketing, and like there's no confusion. Like that's the big thing.
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. If you ask the trademark office, they might say that there is confusion. But names are weird because even if it is your name, you may not be able to use it for your product. It's kind of funny. There's a famous case about the Ernest and Giulio Gallo, I think is their name. They make wine. They're pretty famous. Well, they had like a cousin or a brother who wanted to do their own Gallo wine company because it's his name, so you would think he'd be able to do it. But no, they already have exclusive rights for Gallo in the wine industry, and you're not able to use your name. So, just because it's your name or just because it's something like that doesn't necessarily mean you have rights to use it, which is crazy, but it's trademark law. Yeah.
That is crazy. And I think, I mean, it would require the other party, right? The other, like this comedian who's like obviously way bigger than me, to like have an issue with it and be like, hey, we're gonna like make sure you don't do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, generally you just sort of peacefully coexist until one of you wants to make trouble, basically. So
okay, gotcha. Just like real regular life, So,
yes, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, Zach, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. We'll put links for everything. But you have a podcast and you have a website. Like, can you just talk about that just a little bit so people know about that?
Yeah. My law firm website is strebecklaw.com. Actually, probably the easier one is gamelawyerblog.com. That's so you don't even need to know how to spell my name. And then the podcast is Legal Moves. But it's a game business podcast, so I'm not sure if it's interesting to any of your listeners, but if you're into the games industry, video games and board games, I have just sort of rebooted it, and I have 4 episodes in the can that are going out over the next couple months, so it should be fun. I love podcasting.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks, Zach, and we'll have you on for round 2. People look out for the blog post that'll be coming out as well. And
I'd love to get questions.
Please. Awesome. Thank you, Zach.
All right.
All right, thanks a lot to Zach. Be sure to check out his podcast and his website if you're interested in that sort of thing. And don't forget to leave questions on this video so whenever we do a follow-up, I can ask Zach about it then. Thanks a lot.